Hi and welcome. I'm Cher, the Shadow Walker, and I'm sorry about that. I had some compatibility issues with my camera. Throughout history, there have been recordings of Bigfoot, our guardians, at times of peril, at times when we needed help. So I wanted to take an in-depth look into things, and I have found out some rather interesting information. So, in Vinland, which is Newfoundland, in 1913 to 1915, they were known to have, in the Bay of Meadows, been watching over the children that were there. So I looked into that and I found out that they were actually watching over a lot of children that had come over from Great Britain at a time when between 1913 to 1918, the Spanish flu had taken so many people, and a lot of children had lost their parents. So the Bigfoots were actually following the children, and they were actually tapping on the windows. Now, I call this sentinel behavior because a Bigfoot, if you've ever seen one or watched anything about them, then you know how big they are. And if they wanted to, they could pretty much take the side off your house. That's how I felt when I had my first encounter with one. So I looked into many different things. And so the Mi'kmaq and the Métis in the area of Newfoundland, it was known as Tunitjun, which roughly translates into wild man of the woods. Now, so that predates the settlers by hundreds of years. So they were known to tap on the windows. They were known to watch the children. And the correlation between that was kind of funny because when they said they brought the children over from Great Britain, I knew right away which children they meant. My husband's grandmother on his mother's side was actually an orphan, and she was brought over from Great Britain to work a farm in Ontario. And I don't know what the pretense was when these children were their parent or parents, or maybe there was no parent over there. They were given to come over here for a better life. Well, she worked a farm and she lived in a little hut. So she didn't really have a great life. She didn't have love. She didn't have anybody. She eventually was able to leave there once she was old enough and get married. However, at that time, she was only 9 years old. So I can just imagine that that's probably the same as the children that were down in Newfoundland and all over the place that were brought in to work on these farms. So, I mean, if you're going to give children a place to live and you're not going to show them any love and you're going to work these children like they're adults, which is what my husband told me, his grandmother told him. That's how she worked. So that's kind of sad. So that makes you understand that these children had lost their guardian, which was their parent or parents at the time. And they had no one. So the guardians watched over them. So that made perfect sense to me. And I saw that correlation with my husband's grandmother, and I understood that that's what they were doing. So I can see that they weren't there to harm the children. There's no records of them harming children. There's just records of them watching over the children. And those children needed somebody to watch over them. So you realize at that time period, we had a massive loss of life. We had, from the historical records, there was the Spanish flu so World War I and the Spanish flu both created at least 13 million children that were orphans. So that came from the loss of one or both of their parents. So that was either caused by the violence of the war or poverty, right? Or disease. So historically, the CDC says that 50 million died worldwide of the Spanish flu, which I looked at this. Now, when there's a horrific event, such as 9/11, such as a tsunami, I will feel the loss of life. I will feel the loss of the souls. And I don't really want to get into what I feel or what I hear. It's not pleasant. So, at this time of catastrophic events, World War I and the Spanish flu, there was also MANA, which was militarization of the arms race. It was the alliance that Europe had, the secret alliance that if one attacked, they all had to attack. There was the nationalism, that's the ego driven. We're seeing that now in the United States. And our guardians, our planetary guardians, they feel that. They feel that horrific event that they cannot stop. And they come forth to do what they can to help. They're not meant to come in here and to intervene. They are here to help. And then there's the imperialism. That was back then, that was the great powers of Germany, France, and Britain fighting over the Asian land and the African land. I actually have a friend from Africa, and they were colonized under Great Britain. So these are all attempts for certain governments to rule the world. And that's not what the world's meant to be. We're all supposed to work together, and we're all supposed to live harmoniously with one another. And that has not happened. So you can see why they're protecting the children. They don't only protect the children's, but they protect our land. Precious forests, precious minerals, plants or medicinal plants, they're protecting all of that. So you can see that again. It's happening now again with the minerals here in Canada, the oil, the land, and it's happening the same way in Ukraine. And so the guardians are there and they are watching. And throughout history, in World War I, there was incidents of them being seen that are recorded. And I thought that was interesting. So now I wouldn't be surprised in the Western Hemisphere right now if we start to see more of them come forth because of what's going on with the government in that big country that's creating so many issues around the world. So if anybody has any questions about that, this is what I have found. I have found between the late 1800s to 1984, we had over 100,000 British children brought here. And so, yeah, that shows us one area of what has happened and, cause, effect, and how come they came forth. But then there's other things that I found that kind of interesting. And they're throughout their records. So one of the records was from Russia. In 1917, the Revolutionary War was going on simultaneously with World War I. And there was a doctor, he was a pediatrician, and his name was Dr. Ivan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he interviewed children, and those children claimed to have played with and been watched over, including tapping on their windows, by guardians or Bigfoot. They weren't attacked by them. These incidents of children that were recorded were children that's parents had either died of the Spanish flu at that time and they were orphaned, or their parents had died in the war. So one of those wars, either their Civil War or the World War One. And then in the Himalayas in Tibet, the Yeti. So I found this fascinating. So the La Chipa and the Sherpa people during World War One in Tibet Buddhism, it was known as the guardian of Dharam. Dharam. Yes. And that meant spiritual law. And so the guardians felt the loss of life over there, the massive loss of life, and they came forth to protect. In Sumatra, Indonesia, the orang pendek, and they were only 3 foot to 5 feet tall. They were there, but they had incredible strength, and they were there to protect. And that is in recorded history. And records of the Dutch settlers in 1920 in Sumatra began reporting the orang pendek, or hairy man, and they often described them as protectors of the ginger plants. So the ginger plants deep in the forest have great medicinal properties to them. And at that time, industry was starting to pick up again in the 1920s. So we had large corporations wanting to go in there and basically clear cut and destroy everything to do what they wanted there. And the guardians were there to say no. And that was recorded in history. So they were threatening these remote jungles, and they came forth to warn the people away. And the things that I've been able to figure out is, so certain types of rocks produce certain types of energies, and that energy is what draws, or you're going to find more of them near there. You're going to find a bigger cluster through those energies. So it's like a magnetic energy, and that's what they're drawn to. And incidentally, somebody who's psychic like me, magnetic like a watch, I cannot wear. Nothing like that. Everything just dies. And including using tape recorders when I'm doing a reading. It doesn't work. Now, in oral history through the Ojibwe and the Métis in early 1900s, they had records of the Rougarou. The Rougarou is your Bigfoot or your guardian. And during the pandemic, there was a peak time of that. And I found this fascinating. So I wanted to know, did it just peak here in Canada? Or was there a peak all over the world where you've seen more incidents of the guardians or the Bigfoot being sighted? So I looked. So in the hot springs, in the Harrison Hot Springs and the Fraser Valley, the Sasquatch, that's what they called them, the people of St. Isles, mentioned the Sasquatch as becoming more active during times of sickness. During the Spanish flu, the coastal communities would see Sasquatch standing on the shores, watching, just watching. The outer skirts of the villages seen them, thus acting as guardians to the perimeters because the adults were so ill with this flu. They believe that they kept the bad energies away and the sickness away. Now, in Jasper and Banff, and I'm in Alberta right now, the settlers, the Indigenous guides reported the Great Mountain Man. During this era, there was accounts of children getting lost in the forest because their fathers were gone to war, or their mothers were off nursing in war. A lot of people don't talk about it, but there's a lot of different jobs in a war that people do. For instance, my father was a pilot. He was a navigational. And my stepfather, he guarded the beaches in the Gaspé Shore. He was home because he had part of one eye lost, but he was still an excellent shot. So that was his job. And my mother, she built the ammunition in the ammunition factory that was down there. So everything changed. So there's a lot of little jobs that people had to go off and do. And often children were left alone. And so children would get lost. They'd go out, whatever they were supposed to do, sometimes just wandering, and they would get lost. And if anybody's been out here, you know how cold it can get at night, especially if you're over towards Banff or Jasper. So there has been records of children that were lost, and either the guardian or the Bigfoot, as you will, would guide them back to the trail to home. And there was a recorded incident of, I believe it was a 6-year-old boy that was lost. And he said they found him 2 days later. And even though the temperatures had been below freezing at night, he was alive. He said that a big hairy man came and sat near him, not curled up to him, but near him. And his body heat projected onto that child to keep that child warm. So I found that fascinating because that's right in history. The other one was in Saskatchewan. There was reports of sightings of the rougarou, which is your guardian or your Bigfoot. In some areas of the United States, too, they call it a rougarou. So what happened was on the Saskatchewan River, during the Spanish flu, there was a lot of people sick. And the children were often left to have to go out and find water that was suitable to drink, because not all water out here is suitable to drink. And they would have to find, well, they needed medicine to help the people, the family that was sick. So it was reported that at the edge of the forest, a hairy man would stand, and they believe that the children told them that through MindLink, which they just said they got messages in their head of which plants to pick to help those that were ill, and which areas to source their water from that was safe to drink. And so those children managed to help their families, the adults that were ill, because they were able to find these plants because telepathy, because mind speak, because the Bigfoot sent them the message into which plants these little children should pick in a forest that are going to help the adults to survive. I found that absolutely fascinating. That shows us again that they are here and they are watching us. So I really don't see why people want to hunt and bring one down. So the Bigfoot or the guardians, they feel the loss. They have an incredible connection psychically. They are able to go between the two energy planes that they need to. Now, in the spike in the flu in Canada, we have BC and we have the Alberta Mountain Man. We've got the BC Sasquatch and we've got the Alberta Mountain Man. We've got the prairies, they call them the rougarou. And it wasn't just in Canada. It was all over the place. So I've mentioned Tibet and the ginger. I've mentioned so there were cabins, in the Ozarks. This was one of my favorite things. So in the Ozarks, down in the United States, there were people that lived in remote cabins, so way out in the middle of nowhere, and they were sick with the Spanish flu, and they could not get a doctor or any help in. There are records of Bigfoots coming near the clearings of these people's cabins, bringing firewood and bringing plants that have medicinal properties to help them to get well. And and then down in the Ozarks, when the men were drafted into World War One, the women and the children that were left behind had to tend to the fields and the animals. Now, um, down in that area, there's sinkholes, and it was known that the hairy man or the guardian would stand at the edge of the forest and he would whistle from the forest. And they said that he would guide them, protect them from falling into a sinkhole, and guide them to where their lost herd of animals was so that they could bring their animals back home. And that the women and the children acknowledged that, and that is in history. So that's like down in the States. And the Booger, which was one that was in the Blue Ridge Mountains, he's the one that brought the medicines and the roots, and he would leave firewood for them too at the edge of the clearing for the families that were too weak. And that was recorded in 1918. So that was right at the heart of the Spanish flu. Now, we also had the Sitka, which protected the indigenous and the settlers' camps in that area. So you can see throughout history, they have been here and they have been watching and they have been waiting and helping. And, you know, they get a really bad rap. And yes, to see something that large and not to understand, not to have the gift given to you for them to talk to you through mind speak, I would be scared if I hadn't. And I've been around a lot of big wildlife. I've been 4 feet from a bull moose and a cow at the same time and had to hide behind a huge boulder. And I mean a huge boulder. I have been 3 feet face to face with a lynx staring down at me and had to walk backwards to my car. I've had black bears right beside me when I've been camping and had to just like freeze and not even breathe till they walked past. So I've been around a lot of animals, a lot of wild animals. So you should naturally have a fear of a wild animal. If you don't, well, it's not too bright of you, in my opinion, anyhow. You really should look at them and respect them. The fear comes from respect of knowing they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, and they're going to move a lot quicker than you. But when you see a Bigfoot, it's totally different. It's just a totally different feeling. First, you don't believe what you're seeing. And second, when the mind speak comes to you, then you're able to calm, relax, and have an understanding as to what's going on. But if you didn't have that and you just seen a guardian, I can't imagine how you'd feel. Now, a lot of people will see the footprint, and that's been recorded throughout history. And it seems like every time there's a major issue with war, and right now we're at the brink of, well, what they're reporting is the brink of World War III. I hope common sense prevails and that does not happen. But when I see one country invading another country, and the country that's invading another country is supposed to be a democratic country, I'm a little unnerved by that. When I started to write my book after Anjou had come to me, it was at the time that a Western leader was attempting to get into power and is in power now. So I wrote my book 5 years ago now. And, but I only published it last year. And it's funny, the correlation between so much of what I see going on right now and what I wrote about in my book, which I wouldn't have had a way of knowing. I lived in the middle of nowhere. I did not have internet. I had cable, and that came in by satellite. At best, we had it sometimes. You didn't always get it. And in order to make a phone call, I had to hold my phone up to one particular spot and stand there at the window. It's almost like you had to wear a tinfoil hat to get any type of service where we were. And outside, it was iffy. One spot in the yard, maybe. So I didn't have a lot of stuff that I watched. I primarily just did what I had to do outside or in the house and listen to music. We had a lot of music we had downloaded, so we listened to that. And we had actually had CDs back then. So when you look at the correlation between the Bigfoot and between times of peril, war, you understand. Now, they cannot stop a war. Not that I have seen. Like, I haven't seen any records of them intervening in war, but helping, yes. So it would be interesting to see if during this time right now, there will be an increase. So I'd like people all over to start watching because, every time there's one report made, there's like 50 that aren't. So every time you see one in an area, take a look at that area and see what's going on. That would really make a difference. I mean, as a society as a whole, if you are looking into or you're interested in Bigfoots or you're interested in Rougarous or any name anywhere that anybody has for them, like the Yeti, wherever you are in the world, you need to look at what's happening. And there's a correlation between that. There are people losing their lives right now over ridiculous fighting over oil. There are people losing their lives over drugs. They're there. They're watching. They can't stop what we're doing. Although sometimes I do believe that they could. They are looking at man and seeing where humanity is at. And right now, the humanity level in certain countries is pretty low. When you have oligarchs running a country, the greed of these billionaires is that they never have enough and they always want more. They always, always, always want more. And they take, and it doesn't matter who they step on, and it doesn't matter who they hurt. And it takes people and courage standing up to that one person that they're so fearful of. If you stood up to that person, none of this would be occurring. And yet, if you look at the Bigfoot and you look at them standing there in the shadows, bringing firewood, bringing plants to people, helping the children, consoling the children, tapping on the window and say, hey, I'm here. If nobody else is here, I'm here. There is a certain circle that comes full in what they are doing. What they are saying is our children are our future, and we need to guard our future. We need to protect our children. We need to protect our forests. We need to protect everything that keeps this planet whole and wonderful. And nothing destroys a planet like a bomb, like war. And they felt that. They felt that call when World War I started. They felt that call during World War II. They felt that during the Spanish flu and through all those horrible, horrific events that have occurred during history. And there have been numerous ones. Now, one person asked me the other day, well, you had that picture, and I do, and I'm trying to get it, and I've been having a little bit of trouble with the cameras between the two computers. But I have an image that was sent to me of a Bigfoot track, and it was in eastern Ontario. And that was last year, early last year. A man was out for a walk with his two dogs, and there was Bigfoot. The Bigfoot did not attack the dogs, and it stared at the man. And afterwards, he got the footprint, and that's amazing. And this man never even thought of anything such as a Bigfoot. Now, if you had asked me prior to seeing Bigfoot if I believed in it, I would have said anything was possible, because you don't know. Like, nobody knows what's really going on everywhere or what's really there. I mean, there's new species being discovered every day. And is it possible for intergalactic travel? Absolutely. Because they run with energy. They run on energy planes. So they can use an orb to port from between our plane of energy and their plane of energy, or perhaps another plane of energy that they're heading to. It's we see the world as round. We see other planets up there. But what I see is a little bit different. I see it like this, as planes, energy planes. And they port from one energy plane to the other because they're able to do that. I think at one time we will be able to do that again, but they're looking at us as a primitive society because there's still immense greed from the oligarchs around the world. We're still having people put into power that should not be put into power all over the place. There's totalitarian governments, there's anarchy. All those things correlate to an uncivil universe. An uncivil planet. And to exist in that plane, that energy plane that they're in, you'd have to come up to their level. And we just dropped down a whole bunch by what the United States did. No quorums here. It was their choice, but this is my opinion. What their president did, invading another country, does not show a democratic society. It shows a president that is trying to take over another country just for their oil. And he's a billionaire, and it's never going to stop. It's not going to stop. So that's just in my opinion, unless the people that are under him stop looking at him like he's big. A Bigfoot is big. The president is not. And the Bigfoot is the one that's going to help in the end. So I'd rather align myself with the Bigfoot than with somebody that's in power for a term doing so much damage. I have too much morals to want to be the person that is known throughout history that has failed society as a whole. I would not want to be known as that person. I think sometimes people get so greedy, they forget to go look in the mirror and say, hey, what am I doing? And you see children that have lost their lives because of this in history. You see people that have died from plagues and flus. We just had COVID-19 people. We don't need World War III. And so an increase in Bigfoot, I do believe will be there. I really do. I think that if we look at history, the oral, which the First Nations and the Métis have done so much work and have all those oral history records recorded so that you can look back on it now and you can see that it was there because the people spoke of it. And then governments and even doctors, like over in Russia, they talk of it. It is there. The records are there. There should be no doubt. But the one thing the records make clear is they weren't here to harm anybody. They're here for guidance and help and assistance. They couldn't do anything with a nuclear bomb, but they certainly helped with the Spanish flu. I'm going to look more in depth into the other places that they did help. Um, there's a lot of them. And, I had only touched on a few, but knowing that the Mi'kmaq called it the tunic, and that was a wild man. And that seems to be wild man, hairy man, Bigfoot, those are all things. But if you look into the Tibetan religion, the Buddhist religion, it's in there as well about the guardians and about how they protect. And then the recorded history on how they protected the ginger is in there. And so in Canada, we have minerals, we have oil, we have energy from water, from all over. We are fortunate. We have beautiful forests. We have medicinal properties in trees such as white willows. We have plants that have medicinal properties to them. And people need that. We need those old forest medicines. They're the ones that, if used properly, in my opinion, are not going to make you sick, but are going to heal you. The medicines that people are using now, you have one that counteracts, you're having another that counteracts that one. I've seen so many people with so much medicine, pharmaceutical medicine that they get, that it just, I shake my head at it. I have none. So, I will go to the forest to get what I need. I will not go to the drugstore. Right. I will go with ginger. I will go with the things that work, the things that I know that work, the healthy things, the things that have been recorded down through history, and the things that the guardians guarded to help us, to keep us safe, to show us that they are here to help. And if we're willing to take the knowledge that they give us, can you imagine how much power that would give us as people? Knowledge is power. Weapons aren't knowledge. Weapons aren't power. Knowledge is power. The knowledge that we can achieve if we sit silently and listen from them, if we all sat and meditated for a while and listened, you're going to hear them speak through mind speak. And it may not happen right away, but it will happen. Because if you start to align yourself and attune yourself with nature and the forest that is out there, that's the gifts that we have. Those are the gifts, the planetary gifts we were given to use to protect us, to help us, not to harm us. Bigfoot is there. Bigfoot is real. And Bigfoot has helped throughout history. And when you go back through history in every area, in Britain, in Russia, in Germany, in France, in Indonesia, in China, there are numerous names. In Africa, it's all there. You just have to look. And when you put in Bigfoot sightings during World War I in a certain area, you're going to have them come up. And you're going to go, wait a minute, that can't be. That's just like one little area. But then start looking, and you're going to find other areas where Bigfoot was, and Bigfoot helped people, helped children, and is still helping children. In And like in World War One, we lost so many people to the Spanish flu, and we lost so many people to the war. And there was the arms race that was going on, and there was the greed of one country wanting to occupy or colonize another area, take it over. The ego of the men that were leading these countries, because primarily they were men leading these countries. It's the ego of them that they just could never have enough. They always wanted more. It was it's what caused a lot of loss of life. And um and we know we're seeing it here again with the oil in the Western Hemisphere. So I do believe there will be more sightings coming forth for sure. There's some there's a lot of people out there searching and looking for Bigfoot. And that's the funny thing. I wasn't looking. I just get up to use the washroom and go back to bed. I wasn't looking for anything other than probably a good night's sleep. But a lot of people that go out in the forest, like in the wilderness, they're out hiking. They're not out there looking for Bigfoot. There's like a small percentage of people that will go out and look for something that's massive. And I look at that and I think, well, you may see them and you may not. And they're probably just going to have some fun playing games with you and, cloaking themselves. And because they can do that, they can just evaporate into nothing. We're energy. They have the ability to leave here and come here at will. Portals that they can open, that only they can open. And they are ready with others. When you see orbs and you'll see one Bigfoot and you'll see numerous orbs, don't kid yourself. Those are more Bigfoot. They're just not corporalized, I guess you'd say. They aren't showing themselves to you because there wasn't any need to. But if you would like to go and just, you're just going for a walk and you just happen to come upon something, then that's a gift. If you're searching for something, I'm not sure what you're going to get. Are you going to get a hostile, as you would take it, guardian, because you are coming into an area that they consider protected, sacred, their area that you shouldn't be in, and that you're there hunting for them, searching for them, and that's what they're going to feel. I mean, if you're going to go in there, at least say you're going in peace. I'm coming in peace. In my opinion, these people that walk in, there are some people out here in Canada that have been following, tracking, and giving them apples or things and seeing them and trying to photograph them and sometimes getting a photograph of them. And that's fine. You may get a photograph, but you're never going to get them because they're not going to allow it. They have, they've got their own to protect. They're here to help us, but like you can't expect them to just walk out of the forest and be friendly with somebody who's hunting them. The and they have been sighted in every province in Canada. Now, Ontario sees a lot of them in a lot of different areas. I can say that when I lived in Ontario and I spent a lot of time in Menacing Swamp, I never seen anything. And I was young and I'd go through there, never had one. And I in the bush. In Nova Scotia, when I lived down there, the funny thing is, I wasn't in the bush. I would go into like Kedjmakujik and that to hike, but as far as around me where I lived. I wasn't going into the forest to hike because there was a lot of traps in the forest. A lot of people would go in there and try to trap different animals, and I wasn't about to go through there and step. Plus, we had all those ticks, and they were really bad. The And in Europe, like, it's children that have seen them, adults that have seen them. Children usually, it's when they're lost, they're alone, or they're feeling really bad. They seem to come around. I know that even down in Florida, there's been cases of them tapping on children's windows. And I always wonder, well, is there something wrong in that house that they are tapping on their window and they are saying, "Hey, we are here." I mean, it's a different it's a different sized Bigfoot than the ones in Canada. I'm not really sure where the biggest Bigfoots are in the world. Um, some areas are small, right? 3 to 4 feet tall or 3 to 5 feet tall, yet they have tremendous strength. Now, they're not an ape and they're not from here. What they are is a guardian. It's a higher evolved being. They're not us, and we're not them. But they are here to watch us and to here to help us and help our children. And if you look at every time they hear a psychic cry from a loss of life, they come around to help. A cry that comes from that loss of energy that should be here, that makes an uneven, like an imbalance in our energies that are here in the world. We should never lose that many people at once. We lost so many people during COVID. It was horrific. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have COVID. I looked after people that had COVID, but I never got it. And I consider myself very fortunate. I looked after 4 people that had COVID, and I never got sick, but they were very sick. And if everybody was sick and a Bigfoot came and put stuff at the end of my driveway, I would happily take it because I would know that I was getting help. And those people that were in the Blue Ridge Mountains that the Bigfoot came to, they couldn't get out of bed. They were that ill. And the little kids would go out and pick up the firewood and the medicinal plants that the Bigfoot left. And in Saskatchewan, on the Saskatchewan River, they would go and they were helping them to find the plants through telepathy. They were telling the children, this is the plant to pick. And you can't argue that, because how would the child know which plant to pick? Because obviously nobody had been that sick and they knew exactly what plants to give them to help them. And, like the Lechapa or the Sherpa people, the Buddhism, they believed, the Dharam believed that these guardians felt the loss of life and they would do whatever they could to help. And they did. And you know what? They weren't that big and they defended that special forest that had the ginger. They were the 3 to 5 foot tall guys and they were able to protect everybody from that. I'm trying to get used to this. I get really dry lips. Sorry. And there was no, they were warning these people that they were sending into these forests. And I remember I looked at this a while ago, it was probably about 4 months ago, that in Alaska, there was actual places where they started to do forestry and they were driven out. And the men were like, no, we're not going back. We're not going back. And I know, like, My father was a big man. Like he worked in the shanties in Quebec in the lumber industry because he'd be over 100 years old now. And I remember him telling me that, like, you're in the middle of nowhere in the forest and you're at the forest's mercy, basically. So whatever's there, if you can't protect yourself from it. And he was young when he did that, but he never ever said to me that he's seen a Bigfoot. Of course, he'd never tell you that he's seen a ghost either. But and I'm sure he did because he was around the dead all the time. He had numerous jobs, like they laid people out. So that's my whole spirit part of it, like understanding. He would always tell me the dead don't hurt anybody. It's the negative energies that cause problems that people don't seem to quite understand. So, you know, war, death, viruses, Spanish flu, death, all recorded, Bigfoot, all recorded. And yet nobody wants to recognize them. No government recognizes them. Out here, even when you drive down by the Ghost River in Alberta, there are signs that say Bigfoot crossing. So somebody's recognizing something. But when the one guy out here wanted to have them protected, the government wouldn't recognize the Bigfoot. And yet they should recognize the Bigfoot because throughout history, they've been recorded. They haven't been recorded negatively either. There have been some ones up in BC in logging areas where they even brought in guys to try to shoot them. And that record's disappeared. There's nothing anymore of that. That's my understanding of it. That's in my opinion of it. I know a lot of people that wouldn't go way back into those forests that were loggers because of that. And they were big men. So, you know, um, there's certain areas of the bush that, like if I was to go back to Nova Scotia, the area where I had my encounter, I never went into the forest. She came out to me into the driveway and to us. My husband was there too. Um, to think that a child back in history has seen what I have seen is pretty amazing because children's minds are pretty open. So they're probably perhaps not as fearful as an adult would be and more receptive than an adult would be. I'm always receptive to things like that. So, but my scientific part of me made me look into this so that I could see if there was a correlation in history all the way through and at what times they did come. And I knew right then, like I knew when I seen her, it was just like everything I needed to write down. So I wrote the book and I just didn't know how to put it out other than science fiction because I looked at what people accept. And as a psychic, I have seen ghosts, I have seen demons, I have talked to spirits, and the receptiveness from most people that sit down across the table from me when I do a reading is like, they get it by the time they're done. They're amazed. But there's that group of people with an ideology that says if it's not in this specific book, if it's not recorded specifically like this, or if my religion or faith doesn't allow me to believe in that, I don't. And I always looked at things as anything is possible and that we should never doubt or tout our belief over somebody else's when it comes to it. So whether you believe in something or whether you don't, that's fine. But you can't dismiss what's there in the historical facts. You can't dismiss the the recordings that have been recorded throughout history, whether orally or written down. And I mean, I think there's a reason for it. And I think there's a reason that we were put here with so many vast, wonderful minerals and so much beautiful soil and so much beautiful water. And it's all been taken for granted. And it's fine to take something, but you should leave everything as you found it. That's always what I was taught. And yet, and it's sad because if you travel and you see the oil sands out here and you see the the land and how it's been destroyed, and it makes you sad. It just makes you sad. I'm used to beautiful forest. I'm used to fresh water from the mountains. So when I see this, I think that's not good. It's just not good. There has to be a better way to take something out of the ground. There has to be a better way to do something where you're not causing toxicity. And I think we need to get there so we're not evolved enough, and we need to get to a better place and not cut corners and not create more issues like another COVID-19, because COVID-19 was a virus that should have been stopped. And a lot of people lost their lives. The Spanish flu should have never occurred. And yet there it was, you know, and there's always a billionaire thinking he's better than everyone, thinking he's going to rule the world, take away from everybody. And then there's a virus that comes into play and shows you that Mother Nature is far more powerful, that the Bigfoot is far more powerful than a government, than an ideology of a particular man. And I get sad when I think about what a country, what we could all do to evolve, to get ourselves to a higher level so that we were on a better playing field everywhere. And it doesn't come with a weapon. It comes with your brain. You know, in history, the real heroes are those that are quiet, that are silent, that watch and they help. They don't do harm. And the Bigfoot watched and he brought firewood. And the Bigfoot watched and she brought medicinal plants. And the Bigfoot watched and they guided the children that were lost out of the Alberta forests. And they guided the children in Saskatchewan to fresh water and to medicinal plants. And in the Blue Ridge Mountains, they brought the firewood and they brought the plants. And in the Ozarks, they brought the people, the women and the children, to their animals that were lost. And they brought and they protected them from the sinkholes that were there. They protected the children in Russia. They protected the children in Germany. They protected the forests and the children in Tibet. And yet we don't even look at that in history and learn from it, saying, hey, something huge, something phenomenal, something that is giving us all, they gave to us. They gave those medicinal plants. They didn't ask for anything in return. And yet people didn't heed their warnings and understand that no more war would be best. If adults, if you can't sit down and you can't talk, then you shouldn't be running a country. You simply shouldn't. And that's what got us into World War One, because these people all thought they needed more. It was like playing that game where you can get, you get all these villages or towns or something, or you get certain walks, like a Broadway type walk or a piece of land that's valued at more. And that's never enough. You want more. You want a bigger piece of land, or you want more to add to it. And we've all seen that. You'll see it hasn't changed. And yet they came and they watched and they helped and they handed things out to people, the plants, and people didn't even have to give them anything back. And yet in some of those areas now, they are hunted and looked for by men with guns. And those very men, children, like their grandfathers and their great grandfathers, are the ones that the Bigfoot helped. So I think they missed something along the way. They missed the message that they were sending, that they were watching the children to keep them safe when nobody was loving them. They were there. That they didn't agree with war, but they were there to help. And that they didn't agree with the fact that plagues and flus that take everybody down, like COVID, like the Spanish flu, that instead of looking at the plants that they brought and saying, this is what helped us, and we need to keep ourselves on a better track so that this doesn't happen again, people just went forward. They forgot about it. And they plunder. We all plunder. We've all done something that we shouldn't do. And we all need to take a step back and heed their warnings and listen. They are there, and they are there to help us. And I'm sure that there are a lot more people that are going to come forward and not be afraid to say, hey, I seen one. And if you get a message from one, take the time, at least a few months, to sit down and really figure out what that message is, because it's really important in the grander scheme of things. I believe it helps to put together a puzzle, and I believe it'll help a lot more people. And, our planet, like, this is all we've got. You can't go shopping for a new planet. I mean, there's a lot of people out there talking about Mars and stuff, but we were put here, okay? And those planetary leaders that put us here, highly intelligent. So they put us here for a reason. So instead of searching, stop destroying and fix what you destroyed first. Stop looking to just keep forwarding, because I call that billionaire syndrome, where there's never enough and you want more. I don't know why. I don't know why. People always have to have more. And I think when you see the Bigfoot helping people, like the children that it has helped, and I don't think there's enough notoriety in history. Nobody talks about it. And yet, if you do the research, you're going to find it. So maybe, just maybe, if everybody starts looking back in their country of origin and looks back to the sightings and looks at the times, the correlations in which they came, they're going to see, at very least, that they came in times of peril, in times of war, in times of man's own destruction through flus, plagues, man's own destruction through war, and they helped. So, and if you cannot do that type of research and somebody else has done a little bit of it for you and you get the chance to read it, read it. It's fascinating. And I've only touched on a small portion of what I read, and frankly it was hours and hours of work, and it was well worth it because I was reading it aloud to my husband as I was typing it out on my other computer that I've got here beside me. And we were both sitting there going, geez, if we'd have just heard that in history in school, like that would have been fascinating. And it would have kept your interest a lot more and your knowledge a lot more to what's actually out there. There was so many things that you were taught in history and you looked back on and none of this was there, and it should have been. Because if you look at the Spanish flu and you look at all the lives lost and you see that the hairy man, that the guardian, that the Bigfoot was bringing people firewood or bringing them medicine or guiding children to water or guiding children that were lost or guiding adults that were lost, you see that that whole part of history we don't even hear about. Not here in Canada. I don't know if you hear about it in other countries. I don't think you hear about it here in the Western Hemisphere at all. But we should have. We really should have. And I'm surprised that the United States hasn't gone to try to master the Bigfoot, because they're going to get a rude awakening if they try that. But they seem to be taking everything over. And I see that when I see what our guardians' messages are, that we're supposed to be getting along and working together, not working to destroy or conquer. And none of us are that big that we should be thinking that we can conquer everybody else. And you've got men in different countries. I can think of a few. One starts with an R, right? One starts with an N. One starts with a C, and one starts with a U. And they are trying to rule the world. It's not our world to rule. Okay, that's the big thing that the billionaires don't realize. It's not ours. We just live here. And the guardians are here to watch over us. So let's protect our planet and let's sit quietly and meditate and get in line and in tune with what the Bigfoot are saying. And if you all sat down and just calmed yourself every day, the positive energies that you would be sending, I think, is the biggest thing with them. Energy rules everything. And I'm not talking about oil or hydro. I'm talking about our energies. Our energies from within are the strongest energies. And if we combine them all together in a positive way, which is what the guardians are hoping for, we're going to go so much further in life than we are. And I'm going to keep looking into the different areas and the different places in the world, like Traverse Spine, Labrador, the Guardian, and I'm going to look into more in Canada and more around the world in different countries, because I'm fascinated in the timelines that the biggest sightings have occurred. And I'm fascinated by what came forth. Now, it's the same thing with Dogman. I've been looking into it, and I plan on doing a couple of videos about the Dogman. Excuse me, my lips are getting really dry. And I plan on doing a few more about other things. And I'm not looking into things where they go folklore. Okay. If it's not recorded in history, if it's not orally recorded in the First Nations or the Métis history, I'm not looking at it, because those histories are the most powerful. So you've got your Wendigos, which I want to look into, because I know that there's been a lot of them that were sighted in the Algonquin Park area. and I have hiked extensively through there. So I'm interested in that. No, I never came across anything but black bears and wolves. The odd squirrel, maybe a beaver. I don't know. Yeah, there's just it's interesting to look at what's actually there when it comes to Bigfoot, and what's actually there when it comes to Dogman, and what's actually recorded. I'm not talking about the people who are out there hunting them right now or searching for them to find them to make it scientific. It's already there. It's already there in history. You can't erase history. And that's what's important. The Bigfoot is there. So I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. And I'm sorry that my webcam did what it did. I'm working between two streaming services and they didn't want to get along. And I had to boot them to get along. So I kept having to remove myself and then upload again. But I've got it on, and hopefully in time it'll come to me a little bit easier. Um, I'm going to plan to do another one. Perhaps it won't be live. It'll probably just be a upload that I will do. But I look forward to you and watching and or rewatching. And I'd like to say thank you very much for stopping by. And I appreciate everyone. And I'm Cher, the Shadow Walker. Good night and thank you.